This video contains spoilers for Loki Season 1, Episode 4, as well as potential spoilers for future episodes if our theories become a little too accurate. That warning right now actually means something because our theories so far have been surprisingly even scary accurate. So please strap in and welcome back to another episode of So first, I just want to claim a win for our theories. We were so right on some of the key theories. We said Lady Loki's Sylvie. We were right about that. We said the TVA is evil. We were right about that. Even some of our more out there theories, like the TVA employees are variant, that was proven right. The timekeepers don't actually exist. That is proven right as well. But now that we have all of these theories right, who is behind the TVA and who created the timekeepers?
It's Kang.
I don't see how they could go any other direction with it at this point. It's a villain who controls time.
It just is. Like, especially because when we see the decapitation of one of the timekeepers, you see it's mechanical, so it's advanced technology.
Are we meant to think that it's advanced? That was one thing I was still puzzling over after the episode was, are we meant to think it's like advanced technology that has fooled all these TVA agents all this time? Or are we meant to think it's just like regular animatronics and they all just kind of uncritically accepted that the TVA? I don't know what we're supposed to make of that scene.
Whoever created the timekeepers obviously has enough power to sort of brainwash their entire prior lives from them. So I think either way, whether it's advanced technology or not, I think the whole brainwashing thing sort of erases the need for there to be some super impressive, like, advanced machine. Plus, only like one person sees the timekeepers. Because it's implied that Ravonna wasn't like always like the big boss, because we see her as a regular timekeeper beat cop in this episode. So
you raised a really good point, Olivia, which is they've mastered like time travel and like destroying entire variant universes. So like, yeah, the quality of their animatronics doesn't really bear on whether they have super technology. They're there. They've got the super technology. So
yeah, I'm surprised nobody has made memes about the timekeepers. There's one of them that just looks hilarious. Olivia and I were talking about him. He looks like a cartoon character.
Also, their voices were like, as soon as I heard them talk, I was like, this literally has to be fake.
Yep. I was thinking, like, I really hope this is fake because these are really dumb. And it's either going to be like a really poorly executed villain or a really hilariously executed fake villain. And sure enough, they didn't make them cool. They made them sort of lame. And that's what you would expect if you thought this was all set up by somebody with the power to just brainwash people. Why would you put a lot of thought into the design of your fictional, guardians of the timeline who only like 5 people are ever going to see anyway? So I'm curious how much you think Renslayer knows. Why did she bring Loki and Sylvie before the timekeepers? Like, what was the purpose of that move, from the character's perspective? Like, why actually bring them in for a conversation? Why not just dust them?
I think they were going to dust them, and I think the whole thing that happened in the episode was just because that got interrupted. But I definitely agree that she knew everything, because all of her actions have been to suppress the sort of having anyone have any contact with Sylvie, because she knows the truth about everyone being variant. So she definitely has to know something. And it's also slightly suspicious to me that, like, someone had her job before her. Like, what happened to the last guy? I
think Renslayer is also a variant like everyone else. She didn't know what was going on. And I think becoming a judge means you actually know the truth about the TVA. Mm-hmm. And I think what qualifies you as a judge is that even when you know the truth of the TVA, you still pledge your loyalty to TVA. So I think that's what Renslayer was. And that explains like her romantic relationship with Kang in the comics. Like maybe instead of a romantic relationship, she just really agrees with his goals for the TVA. She knows the truth. And she's like, I'm going to follow you. And I think that makes the whole thing even more terrifying. Like, there are actually people who are willing to go through this, who are willing to help the evil organization do all of these. And I think it's going to make the character even more terrifying. And I think what's miserable about it is that the judges eventually die because they know too much, or their loyalty starts getting questioned. I think that's what the other judge that we saw before Ramona became the judge went.
I'd agree with that. And yeah, I definitely support the idea that she's a variant just like everybody else, because we see her as as a regular as a regular TVA beat cop. So I think there's no reason to believe that she's inherently like different than the rest of them.
I just want to throw in, I don't mean to sort of change the subject, but I just want to throw in how great it was opening with the Sylvie abduction scene, and how that really made me rethink the Loki abduction scene in episode 1. So episode 1, you're like, this kind of fits. He's a villain. He just stole something that he shouldn't have. Of course he's getting arrested. But even at the time, I was like, it's sort of gross to arrest someone for crimes against the sacred timeline, for breaking a law that literally no one knows exists, and just arrest them for it, and then, have this kangaroo court. And it just becomes so much darker and so much more tragic when it's just a child playing with a toy in, presumably at home, who's just plucked out and, told you've committed a crime just by existing.
I'm going to go ahead and lock in a theory. From a narrative perspective, I think it's perfect. But from a fan perspective, I would not like that. I think Sylvie's story will end with heartbreak. I don't know what exactly is going to happen. I don't think she's going to die. I think they're going to do something that just kind of twist the knife a little bit in our hearts. Speaking of heartbreak, everybody collectively felt their hearts shattering when Mobius was pruned this episode. Locking in right now, Mobius is still alive.
Yeah.
Second.
You
can be pruned and not die. You're just somewhere else. So.
Actually, speaking of that, can we just talk about how hilarious it is that it's implied that the TVA pruned an alligator version of Loki? They really were like, this alligator is a threat to the sacred timeline.
The more interesting question I want to ask about Mobius is, who do we think is the original version of Mobius? Like, who is Mobius a variant of?
Harry, you might as well just tell everyone what we discussed.
A long time ago, I locked in a theory that Mobius can break the fourth wall. I know it sounds crazy, but I think it will be absolutely brilliant if literally Mobius is just an Owen Wilson variant. Like, he just wakes up after pruning, he finds out it's Owen Wilson playing as himself.
So Owen Wilson exists in the MCU as himself in our universe.
I just think it's too brilliant of a thing to do. I mean,
it's so funny.
It should be 90s Owen Wilson too, with jet skis.
Yeah, I mean, there's some precedent for it, right? Like, Stan Lee exists, and like Kevin Smith movies exist in the MCU. Star Wars exists in the MCU. So I was thinking if Mobius could break the fourth wall, he'd be a variant of Deadpool. Like, I think we could get a teaser for Deadpool at the end of this.
Going back to Sylvie, as I'm thinking about it, I kind of want to lock in that she's either going to die or like she's never going to be able to see our version of Loki again. First of all, we have the love as a dagger speech we talked about, but then we have the fact that the planet that they were trapped in the cover is called Lamentus, which lament.
So you think she has to have a tragic ending in this series?
Yeah. Honestly, it would go in line with the whole supposition of what does it mean to be a Loki? Does it mean that we always lose? And then Loki sort of reorients her on that, but I guess we're going to just have to see how they decide to frame that.
A lot of this is him like sharing his philosophy of life with Sylvie, and so I wonder if there's not another layer. Like, I actually know who you are. We've crossed paths before. I just don't think that you don't develop a character this good, this rich, this like instantly beloved by fans, and then just say, oh, you're going to be in here as long as, Malekith or
yeah. I really hope she doesn't die.
Another character I wanted to talk about that I think no one nearly talks about enough is Miss Minutes, because Hera Strong, the voice actress behind Miss Minutes, said we're going to learn more of her. So there has been this theory going around that Miss Minutes is the person behind TVA. I'm going to go ahead and say that's a little extreme, but I want to say Miss Minutes is a representation of Kang. She's a manifestation of Kang in the TVA.
That's a wild theory. You should lock that in.
I'm going to lock it in. Even if I'm wrong, I think I'm proud that I just came up with this crazy theory.
Why not?
And we're sure she's not Mephisto. How can you ever be sure? Alligator Loki could be Mephisto, for all we know.
Viking Loki is also present at that little mid-credit scene.
Was that Kid Loki? Was the Kid Loki actually our Kid Loki? The sin that cannot be forgiven?
It was definitely his clothing. So
I so hope we get that line. I so hope at some point he like makes a reference to the sin that cannot be forgiven, even if it's like a joke or something. That'll be the biggest act of fan service they could do.
One victory that I want to claim, Olivia and I are always saying Richard E. Grant is old Loki, and he is.
And he had the classic costume.
Yeah.
that was a really rewarding, like, 1 second of footage. That was probably one of my favorite, like, big reveals.
It's actually approaching what we said in the Agent of Asgard story of the final battle being like different versions of Loki just fighting together. But I think it's not going to be like any evil Lokis that I have to fight. It's just a bunch of Lokis versus Kang the Conqueror.
Oh, it's also actually a really good branching off point for theories, considering we know there's going to be that vote Loki scene that we haven't seen yet.
Are there going to be like a bunch of Lokis and he's like running for like president of the Lokis?
That can be sort of like an adaptation of Agent of Asgard. Like he becomes sort of like the agent of them. And that can be how season 2 goes. Like he becomes the president of the Lokis.
But I really like this idea that it does seem increasingly likely that we're going to get a big final battle where it's a whole bunch of Loki variants against the big bad. That would be immensely rewarding.
It's pretty incredible. And I want to lock in even more theories this week, aside from the ones that we've locked in throughout the episodes. So why don't we start with Professor Carnes and Olivia about some of the theories that you want to lock in?
I'm going to keep that Renslayer kind of knows everything. The Renslayer is 100% up to speed and, has a relationship with Kang of some kind, whether it's sidekick or, significant other, to be determined. But I'm going to keep Renslayer definitely knows everything.
Meanwhile, I want to just lock in and claim the theory about President Loki. Just he's going to become some sort of president of different Lokis. And that's going to lead into season 2 somehow. I think that's going to be his final costume because all these Disney Plus shows have the final costume. I think that's going to be his final look for the show.
Over the years, you could act, and if they all go to whatever place they're in now, which we haven't speculated about, like what that place is.
So we know that from the trailer that we saw a scene with the ruined Avengers Tower. I think this is some kind of apocalypse multiverse. Like this is probably the worst end of the deal. Like this is probably the worst alternate reality that's out there. To bring Ultron back in, somebody online said it's the what if Ultron won in Age of Ultron. I want to make a very crazy prediction, but I don't want to lock it in just yet. I want to put it on there. And I think as soon as I get more evidence, I think I want to lock that in. What if this is the timeline where Ultron took over the world because he had the Infinity Stones? And that leads in how What If began. So Ultron with Infinity Stones, we know that he's coming in What If. And this is how the What If series starts, which complements Olivia's theory about this series leading to What If.
I think that's a universe where the Avengers disbanded. Like that's a universe where we've got an Avengers Tower, so we definitely got all the way up to the Battle of New York, and after that, and maybe that's what it means if Ultron took over the world. But I think that's going to be the defining characteristic of that universe is that the Avengers stopped existing. It was such a cool conceit in the comics. It was like, okay, the world is actually terrible if the Avengers hadn't formed, and so that's going to be maybe I should call this an endorsement because it does sort of lead to like Ultron can take over the world. So maybe this is not a truly original prediction. Maybe this is variant. But I would just add this as an endorsement with a twist, which is the key difference is the Avengers stopped existing.
I think I have another variance of that. I think I'm going to lock in that considering that the show is all about Loki, that this world is a world in which Loki succeeded in the Battle of New York.
We've come up with a lot of theories, and I think we're on track into the highest accuracy. So 2 more episodes. You can support us by liking and sharing this video, and also by putting your comments down below into what you think will happen at the end of the Loki season 1. So that will be all for today. We'll see you next week in another episode of Different Theories.